Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another exciting video. Today, we are talking the Heisman campaign. It's not over. The votes are coming in, but we have no final results yet. So we're going to talk about will Ashton Jeanty win the Heisman, what his odds are, what he's up against. We'll talk about the Heisman campaign. We'll talk about Boise State to the playoffs, something we knew was coming, but we found out the seeding yesterday. And we're going to talk about Boise State's chances of continuing through this bracket to the championship. And I thought, who better to come and talk about both of these topics than a two-time Fiesta Bowl winning champion here in Richie Brockel, former tight end / fullback for Boise State. He also played with Boise State's two previous Heisman contenders, and Ian Johnson and Kellen Moore. So it is going to be a fantastic video today. We're going to talk about everything we said already, plus more. It's going to be great to have Richie on. Played with Boise State from 2005 to 2009, and then he also played with the Carolina Panthers from 2011 to 2015. A great wealth of collegiate and NFL experience, and it is great to have you on today, Richie. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is great. I'm fired. I mean, look, we're going to the playoffs. We got a Heisman contender. I mean, what could be better, right?
Boise State
It's
fans,
awesome.
it has been such a long time since Boise State fans have been at this peak. I mean, I know when you were at Boise State, you kind of established those days. That became the norm. And of course, that has been the blueprint that every Boise State team since then has been compared to. But since 2011, this is only the second time that Boise State has gone 12-1. And it's the first time since 2014 that they find themselves in the big game. It is an incredible moment for Boise State fans that we are back. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about that Heisman campaign. We're going to talk about that CFP. So just before we begin, a little bit of discussion of your playing days at Boise State. Like I said, 2005, 2009, the redshirt year in 2005. And then you were part of that run to the game that established Boise State on the map, that first Fiesta Bowl win in 2006. And then obviously again in 2009, your senior year. So bookending it there for you. And then in college, 293 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, also rushed for 2, and you were just such a blue-collar player out there, establishing the point of contact, blocking for guys like obviously Ian Johnson, Doug Martin, Jeremy Avery, DJ Harper, OKG guy. It's fantastic to
Yeah.
have you on. And then you went and played with the Carolina Panthers. So when you look back on your playing days at Boise State during that golden era, what does it feel to have Boise State back in that position again?
Oh, it's so nice. I mean, like it's like refreshing because it feels like it's back, and it feels like we have that energy in the city again, and people are excited about the program because I feel like for a little while it just kind of like petered off a little bit. I mean, it wasn't so much we were still a good team, but we just didn't have that energy and excitement about the program like we have now. And coming off that Fiesta Bowl win in 2006, I mean, the whole city just went nuts, and it was awesome. And it kind of crescendoed there at the top of my career in '09 with that other Fiesta Bowl win. And it's kind of I was talking to somebody about it this morning, and I might have been one of the few players because there was only 5 guys in my senior class in the end, and only 2 of them were JUCO guys. So it was myself, Kyle Wilson, and Andy Silsby that were a part of 3 guys that were a part of both the Fiesta Bowls. So that was kind of cool to think about this morning.
Yeah, that was an incredible season for Boise State in 2006. It established Boise State. They'd been successful before that, kind of similar situation where Boise State finds themselves today, where they'd had some successful years before that. But obviously, 2005 wasn't the way that Boise State wanted to end things there. They lost an MPC Computer Bowl 9-4. Hawkins leaves, and then 2006. Boise State, brand new head coach, Chris Peterson comes in and leads you guys to that Fiesta Bowl win. And there's a lot of similarities when you look at that season and then this year, obviously, last 3 years not being what Boise State fans expected. And then brand new head coach comes in here in Spencer Danielson, and he leads his team again. He's the 3rd head coach out of the last 4 for Boise State to lead them in his first year to a Fiesta Bowl win. What was it like in that 2006 season when you all were coming off again of a 2005 season that ended not the way you wanted to? What was the message to the team that year as you all established that Boise State program in 2006?
Well, it was kind of just like we knew we were good, and we just felt like that huge letdown from 2005. And so it was kind of just like everybody just had an attitude about it. And it was that attitude's kind of what carried over. And thinking about it now that we're talking, it's like I don't know if we would have had a stellar year in 2005. I
Hmm.
don't know that we would have had as much success in 2006 because there was a huge chip on our shoulder and because everybody knew like, hey, we're better than that. We should be blowing these teams out. We should be beating everybody. So it was kind of that attitude that led us into like I think a lot more success and the player. And I said this the other day on the radio, and we talk about like transitions from coaches and how we've maintained that kind of continuity. And I think a lot of that comes from like the players, and the players kind of carry that over and that mentality. And I think it's like carried over since like the 90s. You think about that 94 team that made a run at the national championship, and their kind of attitude and mentality through the players is carried on through coaches. And it's kind of been, the coaches almost come in, and we have a lot of lower ego coaches that have been done really well, and they kind of just adopt that mentality that the players have. So I think it's the players kind of setting the tone through these coaches. And I think we saw that when Hawkins left, Pete came in, he kind of knew the deal. And then we just kind of just continued on. And the same thing happened too as we transitioned in Harsin. And then I think it might have dropped off a little bit, but I think we just didn't have as much talent as we did. But now we've seen that energy come back from the players. We're going to get this going, and Danielson kind of ramps that up even more.
Well, I love that you emphasize the players there because that's a natural transition into our next talking point here. In that 2006 season, there was a ton of incredible athletes on that team. You guys were stacked defensively, offensively, even into the special teams. But a huge part of Boise State's run in that 2006 season was Ian Johnson and everything that he
Right.
did. And it exploded early on in that game versus Oregon State, the 5 touchdown performance, the 200 plus yards rushing. When did you know as a team? When did you know that Ian Johnson was going to be special? Obviously, he wasn't the starter in 2005. That was his first year. When did you know he was going to be a special player for Boise State?
I mean, I think it was kind of that game, that Oregon State game, and I think that was kind of when the whole team knew was at that point that against Oregon State because our O line was really good. We had Ian running for like crazy. And then you look at like our defense. I mean, there was so many good players on that defense. You look at and guys like not even big names like an Andrew Browning, a Corey Hall, like even Colt Brooks was really like we had some really good players on the defense too. And like I think that's what really helped us along the way because the defense kept us in good positions. And then we just had such a good run game because that O line was outrageous. I mean, we had Clady out there, Tad Miller, Andrew Woodruff. It was a really good offensive line, and the guy that nobody even talks about was like Jaden Daly at center. Like he came in from junior college, and he was just such a good blocker. And I think that Oregon State game was kind of the game where everybody's like, okay, yeah, we could be really good.
Boise State this year has also dominated behind a strong offensive line, but obviously the name that has captured everyone's attention, and for a good reason, is Ashton Jeanty. What an incredible season out of him this season. He is just 131 yards short right now, and he's averaging over 190 yards per game. He's only 130.1 yards short right now of the all-time rushing record of breaking Barry Sanders' record, a record people said would never be broken, and he now stands on the cusp of potentially winning the Heisman Trophy. So, as we transition into this discussion point here, the first question I have for you is should Ashton Jeanty win the Heisman? And the second question is will he win the Heisman?
I definitely think he should. I mean, the season he's having is it's unbelievable. And like you just look at his like talent. I mean, they talk about generational talent. I mean, that's it. And you can say the same thing for Travis Hunter. I mean, we haven't seen really anything like that either. And kind of the sad part is that they're both doing it in the same season. Because I think if you put them in different years, they both win the Heisman.
Right.
Because I think they're both really good. Um, but you just look at what Genty's done, and he's probably gonna break Barry Sanders' record. It's not like we've run against slouch run defenses. I think UNLV was ranked number 10 in the country in run defense, and he put up 200 yards on them. His worst game was like what 125,
And he only
and
played a
that's
half, so so
right. So yeah, it's like okay, he's doing things that we've never seen before. And the will he win the Heisman? I don't know. It's weird because all the polls you see online, like ESPN polls, everything, he's got like 75% of the votes. But then you see the Vegas odds, and he's not slated to win. So you're like, where's the disconnect here? Because it seems like the fans and everybody wants Jeanty, but then Vegas keeps saying Travis Hunter. But then you look at all the guys that are posting about it, like Barry Sanders wants him to win it. You know, all the major running backs that have played, like, Mark Ingram's a Jeanty
Right.
fan. And we've seen all these guys. I talked to Jonathan Stewart, he's a Jeanty fan. And I mean, I just don't see his season being duplicated. And when you talk about the Heisman, it's like, if you put Jeanty on Colorado, they might win the national championship with
Yeah.
Shedeur Sanders and all that. But if you put Travis Hunter on our team, I don't know that much changes. I mean,
No.
Sire Gaines would have a great year,
Right.
but I don't think a corner and a wide receiver have as much impact on a game
Mm.
as a running back can, especially a receiver. Because I think about like Megatron with Detroit Lions,
Right.
arguably one of the best receivers to ever play the game,
Right.
and they couldn't win. They couldn't win, and it's not like they didn't have a bum throwing to them at quarterback. They had Matt Stafford.
Right.
So, receivers just don't have as big an impact on winning as running backs do. And I think, that to me, like who's the best player, who has the most impact, who's the MVP, it's all Ashton Jeanty.
I
And
think
Travis
that's
Hunter's Travis Hunter's stats are good, but like, I mean, I think Shedeur Sanders might be better than Travis Hunter. I
yeah.
mean, realistically,
Yeah. I mean, and Colorado thinks so too. When they sent out their vote, their little presentation to voters, they put Sanders on top of Travis Hunter. Which, I mean, if I was Travis Hunter right now, and obviously I'm not a collegiate athlete or anything like that, but if I was Travis Hunter, I would be ticked at that. I would be ticked that I am not being promoted in the number one manner that I believe that I deserve to be, and a lot of people around the country do. I think part of the thing that is impacting Travis Hunter potentially. I know everybody talks about his snap count, and his amount of
right?
reps that he gets, but you don't see him being an elite corner or an elite wide receiver. I mean, he's good. He's in the top section of the country, but he's not leading number one in either of those areas. Do you think that it would maybe be a little bit of a different discussion if he'd focused on one area? If he'd been that number one only wide receiver, all the gas in the tank, 2,000 plus yards receiving, do you think that he would be in maybe a little bit of a different position there?
I don't think it would put him in a different position for Heisman. It'd probably actually put him lower.
Hmm.
But would it make him a better receiver or corner? Yeah, I think
Right.
so. I think he would be a better player if he just played one position, and that's probably what's going to happen in the NFL. I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, they might have some pack. They might put him in at receiver all the time or DB. I don't know which one he'll end up playing, and then they'll have some packages for him on the other side of the ball. But he's not going to play full time on both sides in the NFL.
No.
That's just not going to happen. And I think like he's replaced. Basically, he's replaceable at both those positions. Like you could say I could trade Travis Hunter for two guys like Nick Nash. Think about Nick Nash. Like, I'd rather have Nick Nash at receiver than Travis Hunter.
Hmm.
But there's nobody in the country I would trade Jeanty for. Like, you can't take another running back and say, "Hey, I would make that trade straight up." No, there's no way. He's that much. He's that good. Like, there's nobody you can replace him with.
I think I would 100% agree on that. I do have a question as for you from your playing perspective, both collegiately and in the NFL. What is more impressive? Is it more impressive to show that you can play two positions at a high level, or is it more impressive to prove that you can be the best? Nobody else can compete with you at one position.
I think it's more impressive what Genty's doing because I think playing both ways is hard, obviously, and I think that's like we said. I mean, there's a few guys that have done it through the years, but not a lot. But I think when you look at like elite talent, nobody ever talks about the guys that are just like grinders out there every single play, like the five technique on a defense. Like he's out there making plays, but they talk about the pass rusher that gets the 20 sacks. And I think pay clearly reflects that in the NFL. What positions are most valued, what things are important, what things are the most important to games. It's getting sacks, it's rushing, it's, like scoring touchdowns. And on defense, it's 100% sacks, like all day long, because that's why those D linemen get paid the most. And that's it. Like corners aren't getting paid. They're getting paid well, but not a ton. They're not the highest paid guys because you can just throw away from them. So I think the more impressive thing is taking one aspect of the game and taking it to the next level.
And I think there's a strong element there, exactly, is developing yourself. The whole point of college for these elite athletes is to prepare themselves for the next level. This is a transitional point for them for their NFL, their professional career. And so I think when you look at records, what Travis Hunter is doing is certainly impressive, but I don't believe he's the only player in the last 20, 30 years that could have done what he's doing. I just don't think that
Right.
many players have attempted it. I mean, from your playing days, did you play with anybody that you thought could have played both ways if they wanted to? I mean, Doug Martin played linebacker for a little bit before he came over to running back before DJ Harper got hurt. So did you ever play with anybody that you thought like if they wanted to, they could be doing this both ways?
Well, I mean, look at Corey Hall. He ended up playing fullback in the NFL. He was a great
Yeah,
linebacker in college.
that's true.
You know, he probably could have played both ways. You look at Scott Matlock, what he's doing right now in the NFL, probably could have played both ways. I mean, there's a lot of guys that could have done it, but it's a matter of how much drop off do you get between their elite performance at their position versus the transition. And you know, it's funny because I like discredit myself completely when I'm talking about this because like that was my thing was I could play tight end, I could play fullback, I could play third string running back, I could play special teams. So I did all this stuff. And you know, it didn't make me the highest value guy, but it provided plenty of value and it provided a spot for me because, you know, I basically filled three roles on a team. So it had enough value to keep me around. It kept me around, but it wasn't going to ever make me the highest paid guy because,
Right.
you know, and there was always the saying in the NFL, the more you can do, the less you get paid.
Mm,
You know, Jimmy Graham would come in on third down in the red zone and score a touchdown. You know, but he didn't play any other. He'd play like 20 snaps a game and he was the highest paid tight end.
right.
So, you know, and then I played everything. I'd get like 50 snaps between all the stuff and I'm league minimum, you know. So it's kind of that whole dynamic of you can find a nice role and stick around for a while. Then Travis Hunter can play a long time because he can do so much. Like there's always going to be value there, but is there going to be the most value? No.
So what I'm hearing right now actually is I think that especially with the elevated perspective of snap count and how important that is, that retroactively we need to award Richie the Heisman. I think that's what we
Yes,
need to
that
do. Get
that
get
that was
that.
what.
That's
Yeah. Yes.
no. I wanted your perspective on that because it's exactly like I said at the beginning. You were that blue collar guy that was plug and play whatever the team needed you to do. And so again, and this is not a discredit to Travis Hunter. He is doing both of those positions at a very high level, and I think it's impressive. But on Twitter, I threw up a post showing the performance of other running backs, power four running backs against what Ashton Jeanty has done, and it's not even close. A lot of people
Right.
like to say, well, it's the rush defense, and again, it's not that bad. It's the if you look at the pass defenses that Travis Hunter has gone against, they're actually almost in the same numbers. So if you're going to discredit one, you got to at least discredit both. But maybe not throw some rocks in glass houses there. But the situation, Ashton Jeanty has dominated every single team he's faced, and a lot of teams have turned around and thought, okay, we can do the same thing. We're excited for this team to come to town, and they found out that it's Ashton Jeanty. He's special. He's an incredible player, and so again, I personally, I think when you're looking at a record that thousands of players have attempted, at every single player in that position has gone after and fallen short, versus a record that only a handful of players, maybe three, you probably count on one hand
Right.
the amount of players that have attempted this record and achieved it. In my mind, it's going to be the record that everybody wants and nobody got. That's going to be the
Yep.
record that's more impressive. And I
Well,
think, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say too. It's like these two, and the whole Power Four versus Power Five argument. Like you can say that all day long, but when you really like break the schedule down, it's like you look at some of these SEC teams. They've got four hard games a year. Well, so did we. You know, we're playing ranked teams. We're playing Oregon, and it's not like these games are easy. And he's still running for 180. So like that whole argument's no. You can't even look at that. And just when you watch the talent, like his just body, the way he moves and bounces off people, it's exceptional. It's exceptional.
that is a argument that has been brought against Boise State for pretty much since the beginning of this
Yes.
program. Once they got an FBS, there was certainly a discussion point during the 2006 days and 2009 days when you guys were going through undefeated. In 2009, when TCU and Boise State both deserved to play a Power Five program and got slotted up against each other because they didn't want to have to face that. And so I know that this has been something that you have dealt with, that the team has dealt with in the past. Can you speak to some of the bias that Boise State has gone through? Was that something that you all were aware of? I know that obviously Chris Peterson and probably any player I would ever talk to from that time is just saying handle the what you can control. But was that something that you all were aware of and talked about while you were running through on those incredible seasons?
Yeah, think about 2009. Oregon comes here. We absolutely like it was a close game, but we absolutely slaughtered them. Like our defense held them to negative rushing yards to the third quarter, you know. And that was supposed to be like this super. It was the best offense in the country, and it ended up being. And they had -3 rushing yards with LeGarrette Blount in the third quarter. You know, so you look at that and you go, okay, we beat them up. And then later in the season, they ended up passing us in the rankings, right? And then they thought so little of us, they put us against TCU. And I think if you take that Boise State team or that TCU team those years, because both those teams were stacked, they would run the table in this college football playoff, no question. I think it would be us versus TCU in the championship. In this field, the current field, if you took those teams and put them in, no question.
I think when you watch the 2009 tape back, and I watch that game every single year. I watch all the Fiesta Bowl games once every year at least. When you watch that tape back, you see a national championship game right there. I mean, those are two dominant offenses that are completely stifled by incredible defenses, and they all have
Yep.
incredible moments. But both of those programs were playing at a very elite level, and it's reflective again of the caliber of players that were on both of those teams and that you got to play with. And so you got to play with some incredible players during your time at Boise State and some amazing running backs who, until Ashton Jeanty came along, were towards the top of a lot of those statistics, and he's been able to pass them. But like we said at the beginning, Ian Johnson, Jeremy Avery, DJ Harper, Doug Martin, to name a few. Is Ashton Jeanty the greatest running back you've ever seen? And what similarities do you see between him and some of those guys that you got to play with?
Well, I mean, he's another level. There's no question. But I mean, and you look back at some of those guys, like Doug was a first round draft pick. Well, everybody forgets about DJ Harper. He was getting injured so much, and he was so good before he got injured. We had to put Doug on defense.
Yeah.
So he couldn't even beat out DJ. So you look at those running backs, and like that was elite talent. And we've always had elite running backs. I mean, you even look at Ajayi and Alexander Madison and Halani, and we've always had elite talent. But like Ashton's another level, and I think like I was watching him run earlier in the season, and it kind of reminded me of Jonathan Stewart, who I played with in Carolina, because he's kind of like a shorter, stockier, big body, good contact balance. Stu would jump over guys, and he was able to break a lot of tackles. But then, talking to him about it, talking to Stewart about it, he said, Jeanty can do all that, but he's got the breakaway speed that I didn't have.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the rare combo there where you have both. You've got the elusiveness, ability to run guys over, break tackles, but then when you get out in open space, the ability to run away from guys. So I think that's like the combination that you don't see. You see guys that can run away from people, you see guys that can run people over. You rarely see them both together.
Hmm. That is a fantastic comparison. I love that
Hmm.
comparison there. Again, just awesome to have that perspective of yours from both NFL and collegiate days. Final question here before we move on to discussing the CFP run here for Boise State and a little bit more of those 2009, 2006 teams. You got to play with two candidates that for the Heisman, and Kellen Moore in 2010, so the year after you, but he was obviously you played 2 years with him before that. 2010 finished fourth in the votings. Very stacked class. We talk about unfortunate situations of guys going up against each other. Marcus Mariota, Cam Newton, and Kellen Moore all there. That's a tough class. But then you also got to play with Ian Johnson, who finished in 2007, finished I believe seventh there in the ranking. So you've got to be around guys that were in that Heisman conversation. What is the dynamic like that as a team when you have a player that's in that kind of national discussion, when they are a household name like that? What's the dynamic like that in the locker room playing with those kind of guys?
I think it depends on the guy because I also got to play with Cam too. So that was the third
Right.
Heisman
Yes.
candidate. So I got to see all three. I got to see all three. And you know, everybody kind of knows that like it's special and they're having like a special season, but it's not like much is really attributed to it or like paid attention to it. It's kind of, it is what it is. Everybody was always so worried about just winning games and, getting to the Fiesta Bowl or getting, in the top of the rankings. Like, I think that was always kind of the emphasis. And I think that kind of even overshadowed their performance to some extent.
Mm.
And you knew they were having great years and they were special players, but it wasn't like you treated them any different or you had any, I don't know. Yeah, it was just kind of like, yeah, it's pretty awesome, but nothing really special or anything
You
for
can
them.
definitely you can definitely tell from Ashton Jeanty that he carries himself the same way. The humility, the poise, the focus on the team, and he goes out and has incredible games, but he does it through injury because his team needs him to. And it's just amazing to have a player of his caliber that chose to stick around at Boise State when he could have jumped. There, I think in any other situation, another player at another group of five program would have been gone, and he's chose to stick around and stay. And so,
Well, but
uh,
last year I even thought about like last year I was like, okay, he's probably going to get a huge boatload of money. Somebody's going to offer him a ton of money, right? And I had the thought, I was like, okay, if you're this guy, you're obviously going to play one more season, go to the NFL. So if you're him, okay, let's say somebody offers you $1 million. So you're talking $700,000 spread there between what we were able to give him versus what he probably could have got, 800 million bucks. Why would you go? Because now you're introducing all this risk,
true.
and the big money's on the back end when you make the NFL. So you stay here, you go, okay, I know my own line. They're all going to be good because they're returning. I know my coach now. I know my coordinator. Like they're going to feed me the rock. I'm going to be the emphasis here versus if you go to a Georgia, like how many times are they going to hand you the ball? Are they going to give you the ball 30 times a game? Probably
Mhm.
not. Where here you stay here, you're the focal point. You've got a good O line. You go somewhere else, coach might not like you. O line might not be as good, so you don't get as good a blocking. If you're not getting as good a blocking, maybe now you get hurt. So that you introduce so much risk in the for what 500, $700,000 when you have a bad season. Now you drop in draft stock and you're a third round pick versus a first round pick. Now you just lost a couple $1 million. So to me, it was always a no-brainer for him to stay here. And I think he made the right move on that.
I 100% agree. I think it's a lesson that a lot of players that in this modern age need to hear. And I think it's a lesson that a lot of them are learning. Obviously, this was kind of the first season of just the completely Wild West transfer portal. And you did see a lot of guys that were playing really, really elite level football where they were transfer to other places and not end up having the same type of season. Now they're in the transfer portal again. And so I think there is a really strong case for the bloom where you're planted. I mean, obviously, everyone's situation is different, and I'm not attacking players that choose to transfer. I think that
Right.
players have, Taylor Green, I think that was a perfect example. He wasn't in the right system here. He went to Arkansas and he went, I thought had a really, I mean, they beat Tennessee, who's in the playoffs this year. And so
Right.
I think that there's certain situations where it works out, but I think that Ashton Jeanty made the right choice, and that right choice has been the benefit for Boise because we are now headed to the playoffs and
Yep.
announced yesterday Boise State is not just in the playoffs. They're not just, as Feinbaum wanted to say, a sacrificial lamb at that number 12 slot. They're not just in the playoffs. They are ahead of two Power Four, quote unquote, champions, and they're the number third seed. Before we talk about the playoffs and kind of your own memories from your incredible seasons, what is your reaction to a group of five program being in the top four, not just top four, top three for seeding in the college football playoffs?
I think it's great. And like everybody's complaining about it, but it's kind of the way the system it was set up, right? They set the system up and they thought, oh, we'll just throw this team, we'll throw a Power Five school a bone. But it's like all the Power Five schools knew, hey, well, okay, that's not like we can really like make a run at this thing. And like it's not surprising that we ended up in a 3 or 4 seed. We ended up in a three, but I wasn't going to be surprised when we ended up in the four, just because you look at historically what we've done, and it just makes sense. Like it was obvious that this was going to happen at some point. It's great that it happens the first year because it's been so fun watching Alabama cry about it and all these schools because now they're talking about the bias and all the stuff we've had to deal with for years. Like all the things we've had to deal with. It's great because now all the big schools are complaining about it. And I love that. Oh, we need to schedule lighter non-conference schedule. And it's like, well, it's already pretty light, Alabama. Like, I don't know how much lighter you can make it. Play some
Yeah.
high schools.
I mean, SEC, they're famous for their cupcake games. I've never seen an SEC team play a single major non-conference game with a group of five program at the very least that they didn't have an advantage in. I mean, even within the Power Four, it's always, even if they're going to play a top team, they're coming to their place or they're playing in a,
Right.
in a neutral site in Atlanta, like a state away from every single fan of that program. And so the SEC, it has been hilarious to watch the meltdown to a system that they agreed to. And the results have been incredible. And one of those incredible results is that Boise State is not just headed to the festival; they're that number 3 slot. And when you look at their bracket, it is a really solid bracket. They are going to be playing the winner of either SMU or Penn State. And as far as teams that have made the playoffs, I don't think you could have hoped for a better seeding. What are your thoughts on Boise State's placement here? And did you like the teams that they're going to be facing in this matchup?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, realistically, we'll probably end up playing Penn State.
Yeah.
That's most likely what's going to happen. I think SMU is overrated. And the good thing about Penn State is, and I think where we have an edge is they always start slow. Like if you look at all their games, they score 3 points in the first quarter. The teams they should blow out, they end up beating by 30. At halftime, it's always pretty close. Penn State starts slow, and I think that works into our advantage. I think we can really get a run on them early. And I just, again, everybody's complaining that, oh, Penn State lost to Oregon and they get the easier path. I don't think that's the case either. Who's Oregon going to play? Texas? Probably more than likely Texas. I think Texas is overrated.
Actually, it'd be Tennessee or Ohio State. So either a
Oh,
team they've already
okay.
beat or a Tennessee program that was just
Yeah.
barely in. So I think it's a great bracket, a great placement for Boise State. It's been an incredible season to run through, and now the number 3 slot, and they get to pick, and they chose the Fiesta Bowl. What emotions for you seeing Boise State back in their home away from home? What emotions was it for you when you saw that announcement?
I think it was great because, like, the Fiesta Bowl loves Boise State. I mean, our fans are going to travel good. I mean, and maybe they wanted ASU to come, but maybe they didn't. I think they ended up with a better draw here for Boise State. I think it's going to draw more national attention. I love it because, obviously I have great memories there. And my first NFL game was actually in that stadium too.
Really?
We
Wow.
went on the road with Carolina. The first one I played in, we went on the road and played Arizona, my first game that I got snaps in. So it was like even a bigger deal now there that I have
Yeah.
so many great memories at that stadium. And
You were
it's
walking them
just,
around. You were the tour guide. You're like
yeah,
this. I know everything, guys. Locker rooms right here. This is the yeah. The
and I
concession
grew up in
stands.
I grew up in Phoenix too. So it's like all of it keeps coming back to that place for me and like this program. It's just so cool. Like it had to be there. Like I feel like that's just like it had to be there.
It did, and Boise State is now going to be playing in their first ever playoff game, their fourth Fiesta Bowl game. What has impressed you about this? Obviously, Ashton Jeanty and the offensive line,
Yep.
but besides that, what has impressed you about this Boise State team this season?
I think kind of their resilience and the way they've played. I mean, the pass rush is ridiculous. They've done such a good job of just it's just an aggressive team. Like you look at the way we run the football, that's aggressive. If you look at the way we get after the quarterback, that's aggressive. And we've had some down games. I mean, we played a close one against Wyoming, which you kind of actually expect that. Everybody that goes to Wyoming plays a close one. And I just think, especially after watching that UNLV game, the way they bounced back, and it seems like we're getting healthier. And that game to me is like we peaked like right at the right time.
Hmm.
And sometimes you can see teams tail off, but we kind of started hot and then hit a little lull, and then we're starting to kind of ramp back up. And I think as we get this 3 week break, I think getting more guys healthy and getting some more like fine tuning, I think That's perfect. And like seeing them improve in their tackling in that UNLV game, they tackled great, and they struggled with that the past couple of weeks. So just their resilience and their like energy out on the field, like they're playing so hard, and that's what you'd expect like out of a Boise State team.
Yeah, that 2006 team was you know how tough it is to play at Wyoming. That was a 17-10 win,
Yes.
and you guys needed a pick six to finish it off there too. So
Yeah, well, and we had a tough one against San Jose State too. We kicked a
yes, you
field goal
did.
to win the game at the very end, and we played
Yeah.
it. San Jose is another team. You go there to play. That's for whatever reason we don't play well at San Jose State.
Mhm.
It's San
Yeah.
Jose State and Wyoming. Those are the two places we never play well at.
And you talk about grit and determination in that game. I mean, Ian Johnson with two fractured ribs. He had a punctured left or right lung. Yeah,
Hmm.
didn't he go to like the hospital at halftime and he came back out or something like that? I
Yeah, I
mean,
don't. It was
it
something
was
crazy.
I
Yeah.
mean, he should not have been playing, and he did, and he kept going, and he got Boise State into field goal range, and they made the field goal in that to win that one. So, grit and determination have been huge factors for this team, and obviously Ashton Jeanty behind him. But there have been some concerns here, some weaknesses. Secondary at times has been exposed with Boise State, and there have been at times conversations about the quarterback play. But the question I have for you is the big thing that led Boise State to such successful seasons, 2006 and 2009, wasn't necessarily that they just had that one dominant player, but they, like you said, were complete teams, especially on defense. When you look at this Boise State team, do you see a complete team here?
I think, obviously the secondary has been a little lacking, and you could say receivers have been a little lacking as well. It's kind of those skill positions. I think when you look at like the secondary, it's kind of be a product a little bit of how we play. We do play so aggressive and so downhill and blitz and get after the quarterback. Eventually that's going to put you in some bad positions, some bad one-on-one positions, and you're going to get beat every once in a while. That's kind of just a product of how we play defense. So it's tough because it's kind of you want the sacks, you want the big plays, and then you know you're going to have to give up some eventually. So I don't know that it's necessarily um, bad play. I mean, I was really impressed with how the DBs played against UNLV, and those are good receivers. Like they did a great job in coverage. So that was nice to see them get better at that. And then the receivers, people have harped on Mad Dog a little bit this season, but the thing he does really well is he's incredibly efficient.
Hmm.
Like hardly any interceptions, barely ever takes sacks. He gets the ball out of his hands. And like to me, those are the big plays that fuel defenses and change momentum in games. And he doesn't have them. Kellen was really good at that too. Rarely
Hmm.
ever threw interceptions, rarely ever took snaps. He just did a good job of controlling the game and getting louder involved. You can see that's taken a lot of the weight off the receiver's shoulders because it's forced teams to focus a little more on the middle of the field rather than just stacking the outsides. Because early in the year when we couldn't get open, Jeanty was just running crazy because they weren't loading the box yet. They were playing
Hmm.
traditional defense, and I don't know that we have like that game breaking receiver that can get open like we did back in the like we had Titus and Austin Pettis, and we
Right.
also had Doug running the football. So you kind of had this three-headed deal where you can't really load the box because you got Titus that can run down the field, and we don't quite have a guy like that now. And same with like you look at our defense too. Like we had Kyle Wilson at corner. You had a lockdown corner. I don't know that we have a lockdown corner right
Hmm.
now, but we've got Tubner back there. He should be coming back, hopefully. Who's a smart player and can hopefully eliminate some of those mistakes. And we kind of saw Oladipo's been playing great here this last week, and I think some of that we'll see come together hopefully for this playoff run.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit more to what you've seen out of Max Madsen this year because he's taken a lot of heat from the fan base. And I've been very supportive of what I've seen out of him on this field. I try on this channel to be as tied to the facts and on-field play as possible and not get caught up in the emotion of the moment. And so I've I mean, kind of somewhat labeled as the Maddox Madsen hype channel, and that's I don't think fair. I think I'm the facts and logic hype channel. But you got to play with a couple of incredible quarterbacks. Obviously, Jared Sabransky in 2006, and then the rest of your time there. Well, not Taylor Tharp in 2007, and then Kellen Moore in 2008 through 9. So you got to play with some incredible guys that did some great things record wise, led their teams to successful seasons. Max Madsen, I'm not saying that he's Kellen Moore. I'm absolutely not saying that, but he's had a good year. 2,714 yards passing in an offense that's primarily run focused, by the way. So that's very impressive stat numbers. 62% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, only 3 picks, and 10 sacks. What has you already talked a little bit about this, but what has impressed you about his game? And not comparing him, but do you see any kind of similarities to some of those greats that you got to play with at Boise State?
I think the thing he does really well is just game management. Like, I think he just understands situations, and you can see like when they huddle up, you can see he knows when to break the huddle, when they got to bleed the clock. He knows when he's got to run rather than take a risk on trying to, like sneak a ball in there. Because a lot of quarterbacks that can't run, they'll try to sneak one in for the first time. He just takes off on third down. He'll go get the first down. That's impressive. Like, and you'll see him lower his shoulder too, which you don't see a lot of quarterbacks who want to do that. And he gets in there and it kind of scares you. But you look at just like his completion percentage, 62%. Like, that's really efficient. Like, he's getting the job done. He's not making big mistakes. He's just really good at managing the game. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do at quarterback, manage the game. So you say, I think this plays that stand out that people don't like is he is short. He gets some balls batted down, right? He's not good in the screen game over the middle because he is short. He doesn't have the Philip Rivers sidearm established yet. That's what a lot of the guys have to do. Like some of the shorter guys, you got to kind of sidearm it through the line, but we've seen him get better at that. Like I think against Oregon, he had quite a few batted down, but he's gotten better at finding the seams between the offensive linemen. So like just seeing him improve that way too has been nice. And when he struggles, I think it is because he's short. You'll see him throw balls over guys quite a bit. So when he's coming out in his release, he can't really come over the top because he's got to get it over the O line and the D line. So it kind of sails a little bit, which that's unfortunate, but still he's completing 62% of his passes. And I think we've kind of gotten away from a lot of those throws. We don't see as many screens over the middle like we did early in the season. Because I think Dirk knows we can't run him. We get him out rolling. He rolls out a lot. We do a lot of that like roll out play action type stuff. And he can throw a cross body, when he's running and he can throw it over the middle of cross body. That's a really difficult throw to make. Like that is not easy as a quarterback because a lot of times those guys want to set their feet. But he's able to do it on the run and throw across his body. And that's a really difficult throw for a quarterback.
Yeah, he has been, I think, very impressive when you consider everything that he went through over the offseason with the injury, having to come back from that. Obviously, the handicaps he was already facing his entire life as a quarterback with the size, because obviously that's always a big factor for quarterbacks. Kellen Moore was considered short too, but he was still like 6'1" or 6 foot, like right in between.
Yeah, he's right there.
Depending on what website you look at on his height. But he had to overcome the size, and then obviously a very fierce quarterback competition and at times a hostile fan base, and he has played so incredibly well this season. I think that when you look at this Boise State team, they are going to be so dangerous with Ashton Jeanty back fully healthy now. He was still playing the whole season, but after that UNLV game, that first one, it wasn't 100% Ashton Jeanty. Well, he looks like he's close to 100%, and you give him 3 weeks of recovery, he's going to be there behind the healthiest offensive line Boise State's had since like midway through the Georgia Southern game. And then on top of that, hopefully Tubner back. And I think this is a very, very exciting Boise State team. Before we talk a little bit about what Spencer Danielson has done this year, where do you see this team going in the playoffs? Do you give them a good chance here of advancing on, getting to the semifinals, championship? Obviously we have our hopes as a fan, but as someone who played the game, was part of 2 very successful teams, what is your prognostication for this program?
I mean, I think if there's a year it's going to happen, it could be this year, just because I think the field is so watered down. I think we've seen so much parity in college football. I don't think there's any one team that really stands out above all the others. I mean, I think there's a few, Like you look at Oregon, they've had a great year. They're dangerous. I think Georgia's sneaky dangerous too. Like that's a team I don't think I'd be super excited about facing. I think we're sneaky dangerous, and I think Ohio State too is another one. I don't know that I'd totally want to face them right now, but I just don't think anybody really stands out above the rest of them. It's all pretty even. So I think really we have a pretty good shot, especially to win that first game. I think we can beat a Penn State. I think that would be a good draw. I know we can beat an SMU. So, I mean, I definitely think there's a real good shot we can win that Fiesta Bowl game and advance. And then I guess we'd be playing Oregon, right? Probably more than likely.
It
Or
would
who's in
be
that side?
Yeah, so it would be Notre Dame and Indiana got to play first, and
Yep.
then Georgia. And I just don't see either of those teams beating Georgia. I know they got
No,
injuries and everything as well, but so it would probably be Boise State versus Georgia,
Georgia.
a rematch of 2011. I know that you were a redshirt year when they played during your time, 2005, and we're not going to talk about that game, but rematch of 2011, and that
Uh-huh.
would be quite a matchup. And I think that Boise State would be ready for that game, but they got to get past their first one. And a big part of whether or not they're going to be able to get past it, a big part of their success this season has been Spencer Danielson. He has been such an incredible first year head coach of Boise State. And again, it's not like he took over a program that was coming off of multiple successful years. It was a program that had unfortunately fallen away. They were 5-5 when he took over at the end of last year and led them to a Mountain West Championship game. And the way the players have rallied around him, the personality that Spencer Danielson has brought to the team has just been so incredible. And like we said at the beginning, he joins Brian Harsin and Chris Peterson as first year head coaches to go to the Fiesta Bowl, which I think is just a bizarre, incredible stat. I mean, that is just so unheard of, especially it's completely unheard of at the Group of Five level. It's unheard of at the Power Four level as well to see a coach come in their first year three different times and be so successful. So you got to obviously play under Chris Peterson. You got to play under Dan Hawkins there for their first year, and you got to be part of Chris Peterson's first ever year there in 2006. So first off, what was it about Chris Peterson that made him so successful? And what was the environment like that first year in the locker room with him taking over as the head coach?
Well, I think this goes for any, not just him specifically, but any head coach that comes in and takes over. And you kind of just get a new energy a little bit. Dan Hawkins had been here for a long time, and he's a great coach. I mean, he's one of the big reasons I came to Boise State. So I love Dan Hawkins, but when a guy's been there for 7 seasons or more, whatever he was, the messaging gets kind of old after a little while. You kind of start to get a little stale, and guys have heard it for 4 or 5 years, and it all carries over. And then you get new energy in, and everybody kind of perks back up. And it's like, oh, this is different. This is fun. I think it's really hard as a head coach to go on a huge run and maintain it. Like, look at what Saban did. I think that's really difficult to do. And maybe part of that is he had so many guys leaving early, and he's just getting the best players.
Yeah.
But I think things can get stale after a while, and then you just need that new energy to come in. And we kind of had that then because we had Pete, and the reason he was so likable was he was just honest with us. It was never you never got like a ton of coach talk. I think he was very much a player's coach. Like he understood what it was. He understood that, hey, I kind of just have to give these guys the structure and then let them go play. Like they're going to kind of do their own thing, and I just kind of have to monitor them a little bit. Like, is it, because you're going to come out flat every once in a while. You got to get them recharged. I had to get them recharged. He did a great job of that. I remember there was times he'd send us back into the locker room a couple periods into practice and start practice over, just because we came out flat. And just like he always had sayings like, if you're not feeling it, fake it. So like you start to get the energy going, and like if you're faking it, so we would go out there and give him a hard time about that. But he was always just very relatable as a from a player perspective. You could just look to him and know like this is genuine. This he really cares, and I think we're seeing a lot of that with Spencer Danielson. And we talked
Yeah.
about like too these first year head coaches winning. I mean, they're winning with the recruits from the coaches of prior, right? And I think a lot of that speaks to what we were talking about earlier with the players, and that carrying over through the players. And it speaks to the program as a whole. And what we have going on here is because these new head coaches come in, they bring some new energy, they bring fresh perspective. But really, what's driving it is the carryover from the players. And I think that's huge, and that's what's made Boise State special.
The Chris Peterson had such an incredible impact on that team. I love that you say that he was a player's coach, because a lot of people have said the same thing about Spencer Danielson when his hiring was announced. I mean, former players were coming out of the woodworks to praise Spencer Danielson, what they saw there. I don't know how much interaction you've had with him, but just you kind of mentioned it already, but a little bit, just what are some of those similarities that you've seen between Chris Peterson and Spencer Danielson?
I think the biggest thing is I think the players look to him and trust him. I think they really probably trust his opinion. He's a great leader through his like energy and his enthusiasm. Like, and some Pete always used to talk about, he'd say it was um, enthusiasm, energy, and attitude. Those are like the three things you control. And I think, he does a masterful job of those three things. And then anything else is just noise. If you can take care of those three things, like you're good. And I think he does a great job of that. Just when you do those things, you can lead by example. I think Spencer leads by example, and he doesn't try to overcoach. He doesn't try to get after guys too much because when you overcoach, that's when people just are, oh, okay, coach, I got it. I think he does a good job of just leading how you're supposed to do it. And you see that very similar between Coach Pete and him too. Coach Pete never overcoached us. He stepped in when he needed to, and he got us going when he needed to. And he put together the framework for us to do those things. And I think Spencer's kind of in the same camp.
Well, final question here, and not at all related to what we've just talked about, but final question, and this is from one of your teammates, Jerron Johnson, posting
Oh
on
no,
Twitter. He said, "Imagine the 2009 and 2010 teams in the playoffs." So you already kind of said it with if the structure had been set up when your playing days, but if you put the 2009 team into this playoff with these teams, do they win it?
run the table, no question. That team was so good. Like I actually had this conversation with Ian Smart this morning, who was on the 2000. His senior year was 2007.
Okay.
So we played. He was defensive tackle. We were talking about this. I think that 2009 team. You just look at the talent on that like defense. It was like everybody except one guy made it into an NFL camp, even backups. I mean, we had so many high draft picks. The offense was completely loaded. I mean, you had backup running backs making it to the NFL. You had Kellen, you had Austin, you had Titus. Shoemaker made it into a camp. We had Nate Potter made it into he was drafted. I had myself. We had Kyle Leafaw made it into a camp, and Tommy Gallardo made it into a camp. All three tight ends, and those teams were just stacked with talent. And I mean, I don't know that that's hard to replicate, but on top of the talent is we had Coach Pete, who was able to lead us and be a good leader and a great coach. And I think the thing that nobody really talks about too is you look at that coaching tree from that '09 team. I mean, it's insane. You have Pete that went to Washington. You have Harsin that was a head coach at Alabama, head coach here. You have Wilcox, who's the head coach at Cal. You have Kwiatkowski, who's the defensive coordinator for the Texans. You have Choate, head coach at Nevada, head coach at Montana State. You have Keith Bonifa, who ended up becoming a run game coordinator. You had Marcel Yates, who became like the coaching tree is insane. It's just as good as the players were. And like all those guys became coordinators or head coaches. You have Brent Pease, coordinator and offensive coordinator. Like everybody on those staff ended up being just some outrageous coach at a high level. So like that piece of it too, I think that goes unrecognized, but we just had so much talent building in that '09 era.
I actually do have one final question that I thought of as you were describing the success of that team and the incredible players on that team. In 2006, you had incredible players. 2009, you had incredible players, but it wasn't one-off seasons. You had these incredible back-to-back to back-to-back. I mean, even 2007, which in some cases kind of got overshadowed, you still won 10 games, had an opportunity to go to the Sugar Bowl. It just unfortunately
Right.
lost there at the end of Hawaii. So, what did you do? Not you specifically, but what did the team do to maintain that level of success, to not enter into kind of a post excitement kind of hangover stage? What did you do to maintain that level of success for such a long time?
I think just it was the guys. I think all the players were just so just everybody had such a chip on their shoulder, and everybody was so tough, and like the competition was always a huge piece of that. We were competing at everything, and like I remember we'd go out to runs, and Tim Saha, our strength coach, would be putting us through a run, and somebody'd start telling him it's too easy and making fun of him, and like he'd make us keep going. Like there was just no quit ever. Like guys could take anything, they knew it. Remember, we'd be inside the indoor, guys would be shaking the doors, trying to go outside, yelling at Coach Pete, he's making us too soft. Like it was just this mentality that you couldn't break us, and it was they would try, like we'd make them try. Like that was the thing. We didn't just like accept what they were doing. We made them try to like break us, and they couldn't. And so it was almost like they almost had to rein us back in because everybody just wanted to keep going. And like we'd run the decks, and we made Saha give us weight vests, and he'd make us hand them out to guys, and you wanted a weight vest, like you didn't want to not have one. And we only had so many, so it was like he'd give them to one guy, and they got to give them out to everybody, and everybody wanted one. So it was like you had to like rein us back. It wasn't like you ever had to motivate us or push us. It was they had to be like, hey guys, like this is enough. Like we're gonna do too much here. Relax. I think that's the biggest piece.
Well,
And
I hope.
the funny thing about that too is we had an assistant strength coach, Ryan Russell. He ended up being the head strength coach at Auburn. And when Cam was there, and I was talking to Cam about it in the locker room one time, and I was like, "Hey, you had Russell." And he's, "Oh, I love that guy. He's awesome." And Cam said, Russell was always giving us a hard time about how soft we are compared to you, how you guys were." And I'm like, yeah, like I know. Because I mean, it's funny because when Russell was here, he thought we were all like bozos and everything. Like, I don't think he would get mad because he thought we were goofing around. I think he got hung up on how much we'd goof around, but he didn't realize how hard we were working. On top of that, the goofing around was just like almost like a distraction to from how miserable everything was because we were making it so miserable on ourselves. And like he would get so mad when we tell Saha the runs were easy. But what Russell didn't realize was, wow, these guys are really getting at it. Like it wasn't like we were not getting after it. We were trying to see what we could do, see what they could do to us. So like hearing Cam say that, I was like, oh yeah, that's funny. Russell changed his tune when he saw another program.
Well, I hope they don't try to rein back this Boise State team in the playoffs, and then
Yeah.
bring that same energy. I think this is going to be, it has been a historic season. It has been an exciting season. Bronco Nation is certainly ecstatic to be where we are today as a fan base, sitting back here with our team in the playoffs. And so hopefully it finishes in a historic way, the same way as those 2006, 2009, 2014 seasons did for Boise State with our fourth win in the Fiesta Bowl. Thank you so much for coming on and adding
Yeah.
your insight and your perspective to these topics. We started the season with a member of your 2009 team there in Kyle Brotzman, and we're finishing it out now with you coming on. So it's a great
Nice.
bookend and a great sign of future success there for this program. So thanks so much for coming on. Thanks again for everybody for watching all the way through to the end. We hope that you enjoyed this discussion. I almost forgot that I was doing this for a video because I just got so focused on the well, it
They
was
were
great.
having fun.
It was a great conversation. So thanks, Bronco Nation, for being along for the ride as well. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Make sure that you leave your comments below. Any thoughts you have on the Heisman campaign, on the CFP, on the discussion that we had. It would be fantastic. I want to be able to go into the comments, have that discussion with each and every one of you. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. There's going to be another video coming out later this week, going a little bit more in depth into the playoff bracket as a whole. Each of these teams going to have Coach Sanford returning onto the channel again. Started off the season, and now he's going to come back on as well. And we're going to talk about the playoffs specifically, and we're going to offer our predictions on how we think this bracket's going to play out. So it's going to be a fantastic video. Thanks again so much for coming on. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Anytime. Let's do it. I'm in. It was fun.
This has been a
Thank
great
you.
one. Hopefully see you at the Fiesta Bowl, Bronco Nation. I'm going. I'm excited. I just
First
got word
one.
today. First one that I've finally been able to make. So excited. This is going to be a great year. It has been a great year. It's going to be a absolutely incredible finish to the season. We can feel it in the bones. Thanks so much for coming on. Again, Bronco Nation, make sure you like, subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue.
Go Broncos.